The Houston Texans finally took a quarterback. Let's just hope that he can succeed at the NFL level. Brandon Albert is here. I'm Adrian Fedke. We're previewing the Houston Texans. We'll see how this goes. Brendan's out there in Washington, D.C. right now. He's on free Wi-Fi, so we'll see if he can come in nice and clear, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully this works out, guys. So I talk about the Texans. I think they're one of those teams that – and we kind of talked about the Bengals. I think the Texans are probably the next team you could see as being a Bengals-like situation, having a very talent-rich team, but maybe not necessarily having as much success as they want due to maybe some adequacies at certain key positions. But excited to talk about the Texans today, especially the AFC South, guys. This is going to be a big division shift we're going to see over the next couple of years, and the Texans are going to be right in the front of it.
Yeah, I mean, this was a division that's kind of struggled during recent years. You look at what Houston's done, 3 straight 9-7 seasons, 2 of them have resulted into AFC South titles. So the division's getting better. Tennessee's going to be getting better. It looks like Jacksonville on paper might be getting better. The Colts still kind of look like shit, but whatever. So let's get into the Texans and the quarterback situation. Let's get into Deshaun Watson. So this has been a dilemma in Houston for like 5 years now. Ever since Matt Schaub was, what was he sent away? Was he released? I don't remember 100%. But ever since Matt Schaub, so heading into the season, they've gone through their fair share of stopgaps. 2014, it was Ryan Fitzpatrick. 2015, you had Brian Hoyer and Ryan Mallett. And then last year, you had that $37 million guarantee for Brock Osweiler. So it hasn't worked out in Houston. Now, pre-show, we just kind of looked, and we looked through the drafts. And you know what? To be honest, can you really blame Houston for kind of how they've handled the quarterback situation?
Not really, Adrian. And I say that, guys, because when we look back at those draft classes that the Texans had, if we look back, let's go back to 2013. Let's start there. Okay, so that's when they ended up getting DeAndre Hopkins. Turns out to be one of the best receivers in the NFL, so great situation there. Those other quarterbacks were guys who really haven't panned out well. Geno Smith, Matt Barkley's of the world, not much there. The next year, they have the #1 pick, and Jadeveon Clowney's on the board. Okay, you take Clowney, no question there. Then we get into 2000 with Kevin Johnson, and the 16th as a 16th. So the only guy really as a potential landing spot they could have got would have been a guy like was it Dak? No, not Dak. Who was the 2015 class?
2015, you had Garrett Grayson. Because
that's right. That was. We had Mariota
and Mariota. 1-2, right? And then didn't have any quarterbacks after that.
Right. The next quarterback wasn't taken to the 3rd round, so there's nothing there in 15. And then 2016, the Texans were sitting there in the 20s, so they weren't getting Goff, they weren't getting Wentz. So the only guy who I guess you could say, shame on you didn't pick, was Dak Prescott. But you know what? 32 teams in the NFL passed on him too. So it's not like the Texans really are swinging and missing at quarterback. So honestly, when we look at the free agency market, quarterbacks is the hardest one to find. So when you have a guy like Brock Osweiler out there who he has some promise and upside, I don't blame the Texans for throwing money at it and crossing their fingers and hoping. And you know what? It didn't work. But realistically, what other options did they have, Adrian?
Yeah, my initial reaction and instinct was to be like, what the hell are they doing? Why aren't they trying to draft and develop a quarterback? And, this has been a problem for 3 to 4 years now. J.J. Watt isn't getting any younger. The prime of his career, that window is closing a little bit, so we'll see. But last year was really the only year they could have really gotten a quarterback, and it would have been Paxton Lynch. And for the Houston Texans' sake, they want to win right now. Lynch is a project. He's going to take a couple years to develop. So, I would have not signed Osweiler, but, I wasn't an Osweiler guy. That's just me. But I understand, too, what they were doing. And Bill O'Brien, he's a quarterback whisperer, and I'm sure in his head he thought that he could do whatever he could do with any of those guys and make them into a good quarterback. So that's kind of how I look
honestly,
at it.
The one thing I think about the Texans, and I circled this, is I'm sure they were the team who called for Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm sure they did. And I'm sure that the Patriots just were asking for too much. Now, my question then becomes, was it more? Were they asking for more than what the Texans trade up to get Watson? I assume the answer is yes, because, again, like you said, Adrian, they want to win now. Now, I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo is the second coming and we're 100% confident in it, But I think everyone in this class would have said, yeah, I'll take Garoppolo over any of those quarterbacks. Now, then again, we knew the Texans in the offseason, they were linked to Tony Romo. There's a reason for that. Yeah. Proven guy. They knew what they could get there. Didn't work out. So be it. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Kaepernick somehow can maybe find his way to the Texans. I think that would make a ton of sense there because they don't really have a lot of stable options at quarterback, so why not take a stab at Cap?
Yeah, it's not a bad thought. Really not. I mean, I'm trying to think. Tom Savage, has he ever started a game?
He has.
He has?
Yeah, he played a couple games down the stretch. I think he actually started the game against Oakland.
Yeah, he was supposed to be the starter, and he got hurt. I wasn't sure if he, filled in because somebody got hurt or if he actually started a game. I didn't remember correctly. So my question now, all right, so let's – actually, you know what? I want to go back to Garoppolo for a second because they went from 25 to 12, and they gave up a first-round pick. So it must have been maybe, what, a first and something else then? I don't know for Garoppolo if that would have been the rumor. Garoppolo was the guy to get for them. That was the guy, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't think there's a question there. That was the guy they really should have tried to go after and get. And again, Adrian, I always say this, you and me, we don't know. We have ideas, but we don't have definitive ideas of exactly who they did trade or what they didn't trade. But yeah, I'm sure what the Texans, what the Patriots were asking for was probably 2 1s and probably like a 2 or 3 or something like that. And then the Texans probably sat there and said, hey, let's call the Bills and let's see what we can do to trade up to 12 and get Watson. And ultimately, that's what they did. So I don't blame the Texans, for trading up and getting Watson. I just obviously would have rather have Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah. Before we move on to Watson, just one quick question on Patrick Mahomes. Do you think that was the guy the Texans wanted? Because O'Brien is the guy that likes those big, strong arm quarterbacks. It seemed like he was the one they were kind of targeting. That was the report or whatever. And to their surprise, he went to the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs went to number 10 to go get him. I mean, they would have thought Mahomes would have fell, but that didn't happen. So once Mahomes got drafted, they were like, oh, shit, we got to get up and go get our guy. So they went and got Watson.
100% right, Adrian. I think that's exactly what the Texans said was they were praying that Watson and or Mahomes would keep hanging around. And then when the Chiefs jumped up, the Texans said, we're shit out of luck. We got to pull the trigger and move up and take the other quarterback because if we're not getting Garoppolo, if we don't move up where the Texans are sitting, they weren't going to get him. I mean, realistically, the good and the bad thing with the Texans is, first, people need to remember this. They won the division last year. They went 9-7 last year, and they had to trade up to 12 to get a quarterback. That's really difficult. So you can't damn the Texans for that because they're successful without the quarterback position. So that's why it cost them an arm and a leg to get up. And exactly like you said, Adrian, because the Chiefs traded up, now the Texans have to trade up even further to get one. Personally, I think O'Brien, his dream fit would have been Mitch Trubisky. I think that would have been the most system fit ready for him. I think he probably would have rather – I personally think he would rather Watson over Mahomes. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, I actually had Watson as my number 1 rated quarterback heading into the draft. Now, it wasn't a great draft, obviously, for quarterbacks. I mean, I didn't even think any of them were really first-round talents. So, to see what happened on draft night was just, wow, just insanity. To see the Chicago Bears trade up 1 spot to get Trubisky, what the Chiefs did, what the Texans did. Jesus. All right, so now the question with Watson is this. How good can he be, and when is he going to be ready?
Well, and I think this is the problem that we all get into. The value of the quarterback position is through the roof of anything. Adrian, you said it key here. All the 3 quarterbacks in the first round, all 3 had to get traded up to get drafted.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with the Eagles the year before.
Yeah.
So you think about
– And the Rams.
And the Rams, exactly. And I mean, this happens. This is continuous. So when you think about next year, there's a reason the Bills wanted multiple ones. So they can go up and get a quarterback if they're not there. But anyway, as far as how good he can be, he's in a good situation. I mean, the Texans, honestly, of all the teams, maybe the Chiefs – I think the Texans are in a better position for a rookie quarterback than the Chiefs. But it's a 1A, 1B kind of thing. So I think for him, realistically, hey, the good news is you were on a team that was 9-7, and the starting quarterback for that team isn't even there anymore. So you're obviously walking into a room that can win the division right now. Just don't turn the ball over. So I think as long as Watson is probably +6 in that touchdown to turnover ratio, Texans are going to be in a really good spot. I think that's the good number to look into. I don't want to say, hey, how many yards, how many touchdowns. I'm going to say +6 is the big difference he needs to make sure he's in.
Yeah. Any chance he's an opening day starter? I'm thinking they go Savage, but I can't imagine Savage does well for them.
Well, I think Savage starts, but I'm not surprised if he gets surpassed by Watson. I think Watson, and I talked about this in our quarterback show we did over for the draft. I think Watson's biggest problem is he doesn't make full field reads. He's very much a one half of the field read, 1-2 run. And that's my biggest concern I've had with Watson. I don't think he's the most accurate passer with the ball either. So that was always my concern with Watson. So I think Savage starts. And if Watson does get in, it's probably week 2 or 3. I think it's pretty quick. But I think it's going to be a fair competition between those two guys.
He's definitely got a quick trigger. I remember 2015, Hoyer started the first half, and then Malik came in and played the second half. It was the first game of the season. So clearly Bill O'Brien, he doesn't care. He's got a quick trigger. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the defense. This was the #1 ranked defense last season. Lost A.J. Boye. I mean, is that really a big deal? They got Kevin Johnson now. They lost John Simon, Vince Wilfork. So not really much lost, really. So that tandem, J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, that is just a ridiculous tandem there, 3-4 defensive ends. So my question for you is this. How scary is that for an offensive coordinator having to scheme around those two?
Oh, it's freakish. It's absolutely freakish because, if you were to give me a list of top 10 defensive ends, they have 2 of them on the same team.
Yeah.
And that's unbelievable to say. Now, the thing that people, kind of need to remember is with Watt can move up and down the line, no problem. I mean, he is a very similar to what Myles Garrett, is going to potentially project into, a guy who can move up and down the line, no problem. Clowney is finally, the last 2 years, you really saw the growth of him getting into that position where he needs to anchor the run. Excuse me. But defensive line, when you have your 2 bookends being that nasty, you can't slide protect. You can't necessarily say, hey, let's make sure we slide away from the backside defensive end, and we'll put all of our focus here on, a guy like Khalil Mack kind of thing that you can do against the Raiders. But you can't really do that against the Texans. Both of those guys are pretty much going to have to get one-on-one help with a tackle and then maybe a chip from a back or a tight end or maybe a free guard. But it's scary, Adrian, when you have 2 guys who are both capable of 10-plus sacks in a season.
Yeah, and I mean, the transformation for Clowney has been, pretty crazy. People were quick to judge him and say, put that bust label on him.
Yep.
But really turned it on last year, and man, that is a dynamic tandem. Now, the second question I have regarding Watt, how much of a window does he have left where his play is still elite? Now, I have him for my football rankings that I do. I have him and Tom Brady as, basically tied for the top player in the league as a 9.3 rating. I have rated J.J. Watt as high as 10 in the past. So is the window closing a little bit? Because I've rated him lower this year than I have in past years.
I think it is, and I say that because, Watt had been the bill of clean health forever in the league.
Yeah.
And then last year was the first real year we're starting to see injury concerns. So, you can look at 2 sides of the coin here. You could say, look, this is just a blip in the radar. He's never been this guy. But I also could argue, this is kind of the way I think about it, J.J. Watt has always prided himself at being the tough guy, the guy who's going to outwork and grind and play hurt. But now when he's not playing, I think that's also a very real sign for concern then. I think you also could say, hey, look, if Watt's sitting, something's up. So I could say that's a very real concern, and so much of his game is dominated by power. I think there's a very real concern there for his future. Yeah,
for sure. I'm looking at his age. He's 28, so 2 years from 30. This elite type of play. I mean, let's look at the stats. Some of these seasons he's had, it's absolutely ridiculous. So 2012, 20.5 sacks, 10.5 in 2013, 20.5 in 2014, 17.5 in 2015. So we'll see if he can get back to that 17.5 number this year.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a little high. Honestly, I think he's probably going to be closer to 13, 14, and I don't think 17 and a half is realistic. But I also say that because we're seeing the development of Clowney, and so there's obviously going to be some sacks drop there. And we didn't talk about probably one of the best edge rushers in the league that no one knows about, Wynton Merciless. He is fantastic. He's a top 10 outside backer coming off the edge too, and he's a 10-plus sack guy capable as well. So I think Watt numbers drop a little bit, but I think that's a combination of his health and then also the production between Merciless and Clowney.
All right, let's move on. Let's go position by position, kind of go through it real quick. We talked a lot about quarterbacks, so let's move to running back. Lamar Miller, do you like him? It seems like he always gets kind of hyped up a little bit, and I don't know, it never seems to really do what I expect him to do. I mean, he puts up solid numbers, but is he a tad overrated to you?
I don't think so. I mean, I like Lamar Miller a lot, personally. I mean, he's one of the few guys who's a pretty consistent 1,000-yard guy. I mean, he's been 1,000-yard back 3 of the last 4 years, and realistically, he's not exactly playing behind the Texans line or the Titans line or the Cowboys line. I mean, he's playing with average offensive lines, and an average offensive team. So Miller's a guy who's capable of a 1,000-yard season every year, probably about 35 to 45 receptions a year is probably a fair number for him. I mean, the thing I love most about him, especially this past year, he was 6th in the league in most attempts. So obviously he's getting the ball a ton, and he's one of those guys who he's not really getting hurt. I mean, he's consistent. You don't really see him being hurt guy. So I like Lamar Miller. I think maybe the expectations for him, maybe sometimes they do get a little high, but I also think we also need to take it for a grain of salt and remember that he's never really played with a top 10 offensive line.
Yeah, it's more the expectations are high. Like, and even like fantasy circles, he's always a guy that gets taken in the first round. Like, seems like so. All right, he's definitely versatile, definitely productive, and something to note. I mean, the Texans have actually run the ball more than anybody the last 3 years, so they do run the ball a lot.
Yep.
All right, wideout, DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, so he struggled last year with Brock Osweiler. The connection never really seemed to work out. So what kind of DeAndre are we going to see this year? You think we'll kind of get more of the one from 2 years ago?
First off, I'm going to say this right off the bat because I'm biased, but Nuke is my dude. I love DeAndre Hopkins. I had the privilege of working with him when I was at IMG Academy, and he's just an awesome guy. I love him. Something that a lot of people don't know, he's a huge Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, which most people would never think about. But
black.
Yeah, Nuke's a huge Chili Peppers fan, so big shouts to Nuke. But I think the question I have here with the receiving core is Nuke's a stud. In my opinion, I don't think there's a question he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL. So again, I mentioned it earlier how their Texans are very similar to the Bengals. Talent rich all across the roster. Now we just got to put it all together. So Nuke's a stud. My question at receiver is who's going to be the number 2? Is it Jalen Strong? Is it Braxton Miller? Is it Will Fuller? It's a little bit of a revolving door on the other side. So that's my question is where's the number 2 receiver going to be? I mean, Will Fuller certainly has all the athletic gifts. Braxton Miller is a guy still very much, adapting to the receiver role. But Will Fuller has the alligator arms. So, I just kind of curious who's going to be the number 2 to give Nuke some help out there.
Yeah, Fuller kind of started the season a little hot. But he does have the drop seasons. He's known to drop the ball a lot. Fuller's probably their guy, man. But because Jalen Strong has been awful. I think he can't get separation. Braxton Miller, former quarterback. We'll see how he kind of translates. But yeah, there's not much there.
No, I mean, Will Fuller was drafted where he was because of the potential and the ability to take the top off the defense. And there's no doubt he can do that. He's just got to be consistent at catching the football. Otherwise, nothing else matters.
Yeah. And rankings, just real quick. I got DeAndre Hopkins, number 5. Julio Jones, number 1. Antonio Brown, number 2. Odell Beckham, number 3. A.J. Green, number 4. And Hopkins at number 5. So
my guy Nuke.
About where he should be. And Lamar Miller, on the other hand, I got him at 13. So I definitely have him ranked lower than you probably would put him.
Okay, fair enough.
So I got him a lot. I put Jordan Howard, Melvin Gordon ahead of him. I got Devontae Freeman ahead of him, Marco Murray. So it's kind of like that range.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's that. All right, let's move on. O-line. Okay. Dwayne Brown, is he still good?
Yes. So the Texans, I think, are probably one of the lower end offensive lines in the NFL. I'd probably say they're 20, 22 in that range. When I look at Brown is undoubtedly their best player. He's a very, very good NFL left tackle, but he's on a holdout. Now, here's the thing I want to kind of highlight, and I took some notes from Pro Football Focus, so I got to give him a shout there. But Dwayne Brown, okay, under his contract situation, because he's a veteran, okay, he is allowed to miss up to 8 regular season games without it penalizing his contract. So Brown, technically, if he really wanted to, he could hold out all the way to midseason without it really affecting his dollars and cents. Now, that very rarely happens. We don't see that happens with holdouts, but it does show you in some situations with these holdouts, the power is actually with the player. So in his situation, the power is with him. And let me tell you this. If I got a rookie quarterback, you know what I don't want to do? Not know my left side's protected. And I don't care if it's a preseason, regular season game. I want to know every single time that Watson's in there, he's protected. Last thing I want to do is see a rookie quarterback go down and blow his ACL. And now I'm thinking, all right, so now what do we do at quarterback? So that is the situation there. Now, that said, they also have Chris Clark, who is awful at right tackle. Yeah. Just awful. I mean, blocking a shadow seems to be a challenge for him sometimes. And I'm not trying to rip the guy a new one, but it's been awful. He's allowed 67 pressures, which is the most in the NFL at right tackle. So that's hard to say. And he was also flagged 13 times this past year for different penalties. So Chris Clark is a major liability there at right tackle. And then they have rotation guys at guard. They got some growth at center. Things are starting to work out there a little bit for them. But aside from left tackle and center, the Texans don't have a great deal on the offensive line. So that goes back to my earlier comment. I like Lamar Miller, and he gets the ball a ton. Yeah. But his yards per carry is very low just because he's not exactly having a world beaters at offensive line in front of him.
Yeah, he really doesn't. Dwayne Brown was the guy that was like one of the top 3 tackles in the league, and then he kind of tore his quad a couple years ago, and he kind of had a resurgence last year. You look at the rest of that line. Jeff Allen was a free agent acquisition for them. He hasn't really panned out to the way that they thought he would. Chris Clark, you already mentioned him. Their left guard, Zua's, God damn it, how do you say his name? Su'a-Filo or something like that?
Yep,
he stinks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he stinks. You know he stinks because I can't pronounce his name. And then you got Greg Mance and Nick Martin as your center. Now, Mance kind of played for them last year. I believe Martin was hurt, but Martin was a second-round pick for them.
Yep.
So I do think the center position is stabilized because they have 2 good ones. So
yep.
They're solid there. But, yeah, definitely question marks the rest of that line. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think my question would just be, say, hey, can we see Martin slide over and play a guard spot, kind of like his brother did? I mean, both of them were guys who were center, tackle, guard combinations, and Zach obviously is playing guard, so I'm wondering if younger Martin can also play guard.
That's a great point. They should do that, actually. You can just keep Jeff Allen at right guard, but the Zua guy, get Su'a-Filo, get rid of him.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, we talked about. Okay, we don't need to get into the D-line because we already talked about Clowney and Watt. So let's move on to the linebackers. And I do want to get into Whitney Mercilus a little bit. You talked about him already. But when it comes to underrated outside linebackers, definitely in the 3-4, he might be the most underrated one of the bunch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how could he not be? I mean, I think it's one of those things that when people think of the Texans, the first thing they think of is J.J. Watt, and rightfully so. I understand that. But, I mean, when you look at Mercilus, I mean, he's a guy over the last 4 seasons, he's been +5 sacks every single year. In fact, in 2015, he was a 12-sack guy. So production there is certainly there. And, I mean, he's one that doesn't get the love that he deserves. He is really, really good, not just coming off the edge, but he's also really good in the run game. He's definitely a top 10 outside backer there.
Oh, dude, I have him at number 5, so I got him really high. So, 3-4 outside linebackers, so I'll just go down this list real quick. Von Miller, number 1, Justin Houston, number 2. Put Jamie Collins at number 3, although he's kind of more, 4-3 variety. But Chandler Jones, number 4, Whitney Mercilus, number 5, Melvin Ingram, 6. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Mercilus is very underrated. I agree, though, Adrian.
Yeah. And then another one that's really good for them, and he's been laying the lumber at middle linebacker, inside linebacker, Bernardrick McKinney.
Yeah, Bernardo McKinney is actually the second highest guy as far as terms of inside rushing. So the Texans, they love the blitz. I mean, they love to be aggressive there. So McKendry's another guy who is frequently on the hunt. He's coming up in the A gap situation. Now, that also is allowed when you have a established veteran like Brian Cushing, who they've had for years, playing the other inside backer spot there. So linebacker wise, Texans are very, very, very good.
Yeah, and I mentioned they lost John Simon, who was kind of an underrated player for them, but they're so talented at the position, not really going to be hurting him too much. They added Zach Cunningham in the draft too, so they got another linebacker, inside linebacker there. So they're pretty much set over there. Secondary, let's move on there. So A.J. Boye got a nice contract. That's all fine and all, but quite frankly, Kevin Johnson's going to be better for them, so in my opinion. And you got Joseph and you've got Kareem Jackson, so their cornerbacks are still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is about A.J. Boye is I'm not ready to anoint him as a surefire thing.
Same.
I mean, we have seen it happen all the time with corners, the guys who can be shooting stars. And I think that position in the NFL probably historically might be the biggest, I'll say, catch lightning in the bottle kind of situation. So I think A.J. Boye could be one of those candidates. I'm not saying that he's not. He had an unbelievable year last year, looked fantastic, especially in zone coverage. But I'm a little curious to see, is he going to be consistent? More power to him that he got paid. So Kevin Johnson, in you come to step in. You were a first-round pick out of Wake Forest. You were expected to do good things. Then you have Kareem Jackson, who is probably a top 40 corner in the NFL. I mean, I don't think he's a stud, but I think he's a good number 2. And then you have a solid older vet in Jonathan Joseph. Hey, that's a good corner tandem right there between the three of them.
Yeah. I've got Kareem Jackson as 19, so top 20-ish. Kevin Johnson's here somewhere. Jonathan Joseph is 35. Kevin Johnson's probably somewhere between 20 and 35. I just can't find him because my handwriting sucks, but that's okay. All right. Anything else about the Texans you'd like to discuss?
The only other thing, and I'll kind of throw this, the guy I want to see grow from is going to be KJ Dillon. He was a late-round pick from the Texans, but he's going to walk in and be the starter there for one of the safeties with the Texans. So curious to see how his opportunity is going to come to shine. Texans have never really had a great safety situation. I mean, I can't tell you anyone that they've ever had who was even a potential Pro Bowl caliber guy as a safety. So I'm curious to see there, but realistically, in the end of the day, the Texans' success are measured on 2 situations. One, the quarterback, which everyone knows about, and the offensive line. Everything else in Houston is ready to win right now, though. I think overall this year, they went 9-7 last year. I think I'm going to see them slip a little bit and go to 8-8, but that's mostly because I saw a lot of growth in the division and not as much growth with the Texans.
Pretty much nailed it right on the head because I got 8-8 basically for the same reasons. So there you go. Underrated player on the Texans.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go merciless here, and it's not because his talent isn't there, because it certainly is. I think it's just he's not the household name because he plays with guys like Clowney and Watt that he's not really as well known there. So he's my underrated guy.
Okay. I'll go with Kevin Johnson, just to throw a different name out there. Merciless was my guy, but that's kind of the easy one. So now, who's on the hot seat?
Yeah, so hot seat situation, I got to say it's Bill O'Brien. I mean, He came in as a quarterback whisperer, and to his credit, he hasn't really had a lot of rookies to grow, so I think that's an obvious one. But if I'm looking more on the player side of things, I would probably say I would say Jalen Strong, at that receiver spot. But honestly, I think any of those 3 guys talked about, Miller, Strong, and Fuller, all 3 of them, we need to see them grow. Otherwise, the Texans, they're going to have to do something to kind of help Hopkins out there.
I mean, is Tom Savage really a fair one? I mean, because obviously we know that situation. I like the Jalen Strong one, though, because I feel like he's been pretty bad since he's been drafted. I never saw anything in him, so we'll see. He and Braxton Miller, both of them, I guess. Because
Yeah.
if neither of them pan out, I mean, Texans are going to be going receivers galore next year in the draft.
Yeah, especially because Fuller was the only one who was a first round pick of those guys, so the money obviously is tied into him. So it's hard for us to say, oh, Fuller's on the hot seat. Well, financially, the Texans are kind of on the hook there a little more, so they're probably going to give Fuller a little more leniency. Miller and Strong, financially, the Texans don't lose nearly as much if they move on from them sooner rather than later. So I think those are guys that are fair to be on the hot seat.
Yeah, maybe Jeff Allen too, just because of the money they gave him last year.
Yeah, that's fair too. Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, that's about it. Predictions, made everything, went through the Texans. So up next, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Stay tuned, guys. That's Brennan Albert. I'm Adrian Fedke. We'll be right back.
Appreciate it.